Have you ever wondered why your heart still carries so much sorrow, even when you already have the things everyone else would call happiness? You have a stable job, someone to share your life with, and small joys you can post online. Yet when night falls, the emptiness quietly returns. It's not violent, but it lingers like a wound that refuses to heal, leaving you weary even when nothing has gone wrong. You try to explain it away. Maybe you just need more success, more love, or a change of environment. But even after you achieve those things, the heaviness comes back. Carl Jung once reminded us, "What you do not bring into consciousness will return to you as fate." The suffering you carry is not a mistake, but a signal, a reminder that some deeper part of you has been abandoned. In truth, suffering is not against you. It is like a crumpled map, tossed aside, yet it keeps falling back in front of you, demanding to be unfolded. And if you dare to look at it, you will see that it leads back to yourself. Give me 23 minutes, not to erase the wound, but to help you realize this. Suffering was never a sentence. It is a door, and once you step through it, you will never suffer in the same way again. Have you ever woken up in the morning with your body still full of energy, but your mind weighed down, as if the day ahead were nothing more than a copy of yesterday? You still eat breakfast, still go to work, still laugh and talk, yet something is missing, something you can't quite name. And it is in these familiar, repetitive moments that the most common form of suffering appears. It isn't an explosive tragedy, but a slow, constant erosion that makes you feel, little by little, that you are living the wrong way. Jung once called the mask we are forced to wear each day the persona. You learned how to wear it early. When you were obedient, you were praised. When you were quiet, you were seen as mature. When you sacrificed, you were called good. But along with those compliments, you also learned how to hide the truth. You hid your anger to keep the peace. You hid sadness to avoid bothering anyone. You hid your desires to be called reasonable. And slowly, through all this hiding, you drifted further away from yourself. Suffering doesn't appear because you failed or because you lack something. It appears because you keep betraying your inner voice. You say yes when you want to say no. You smile when you only want to walk away. You try to convince yourself that everything is fine, even as your body and your mind send signals screaming the opposite. And because you've grown used to ignoring them, those signals return again and again, stronger each time, until you are forced to pay attention. You can notice it in the smallest of details, the sudden nights of insomnia, the emptiness you feel even when you achieve what you thought you wanted, the coldness toward joys that once excited you. These are not signs that you are broken. They are the way your soul demands to be heard. The problem is that we are taught pain is an enemy, that silence and endurance are virtues. But the truth is the opposite. Suffering is the mirror you've been avoiding, and unless you dare to look into it, that reflection will continue to follow you, dragging you back into the same cycle again and again. Jung once declared, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is one of the keys to understanding why people suffer so much. When you force yourself to paint over everything with positivity, when you demand that you must always be strong, cheerful, and clear-minded, that is precisely when you suppress the other half of you, the chaotic, the shadowed, the hidden parts. And the more you suppress them, the more they find distorted ways to break through. You can see this in the most ordinary moments, like when you suddenly feel irritated with a colleague, not because they did anything wrong, but because they accidentally reflect the very weakness you've been denying. Or when you feel uneasy without knowing why every time you're alone, and so you keep yourself constantly busy, scrolling, working, distracting, just so you don't have to hear that uncomfortable whisper inside. The shadow doesn't scream. It creeps into your subtlest reactions and quietly steers you from behind. Jung's philosophy suggests this. The shadow doesn't only hold what is ugly, it also holds the abilities you've never dared to use. The confidence you call arrogance, the decisiveness you label cruel, the ability to protect your boundaries that you mistake for selfishness. All of these get thrown into the dark, and so you live as the acceptable version of yourself, but lose the very qualities needed to feel whole. That is why so many people, even after achieving success, still feel hollow. They reach their goals, but something remains missing. Not because they didn't try hard enough, but because they left behind a part of themselves along the way. They thought they were running toward the light, but the shadow still bound them from behind. Jung believed that suffering is the inevitable result of this split. Pain is not a curse. It is an invitation to return for the missing pieces of yourself. And the path is not to banish the shadow, but to face it, to dialogue with it, to discover that within that darkness lies the very energy you need to live a life that feels whole. There is something few people realize. Most of the suffering you carry does not come from the present, but from a mechanism that quietly formed long ago. As a child, you learned to adjust yourself to survive. You were praised when you stayed quiet, scolded when you were stubborn, rewarded when you pleased others, and punished when you expressed anger. And so, a shell began to form. You started to believe that to be loved, you had to hide part of yourself. This mechanism repeats itself throughout life. You step into work and find that honesty often causes trouble, so you stay silent. You enter a relationship and discover that when you are too genuine, people may leave, so you shrink back. Slowly, you stop living from your own center and instead live according to what others expect. This is the unconscious loop. Each time you betray your true feelings, a fragment of you is left behind. And it is those abandoned fragments that return, cloaked as suffering, demanding to be seen. The danger is that you don't notice this loop controlling you. You only see the symptoms: exhaustion, emptiness, unexplained failures in relationships. You call it bad luck, but in truth, it is the logic of the unconscious. It repeats the same old script until you are awake enough to see it. Pay attention. Have you ever found yourself falling into the same type of relationship, the same kind of disappointment, even though on the surface the stories look different? Jung called this the return of the shadow. When you refuse to face it, the unconscious restages the situation, this time louder, sharper, until you cannot ignore it. It is like a record stuck on one track, replaying the same notes again and again, until you finally stop the machine and change it. The turning point lies here. Suffering is not meant to crush you, but to awaken you. It is the soul's emergency signal, saying, "You have strayed too far from your center." If you continue to ignore it, the loop will not vanish. It will only shift its form, one time in love, another time in work, another in the way you feel about yourself. And here is the truth that so few are willing to accept. Suffering is not something to run from, but an invitation to confront the parts of yourself that have never been seen. That is why Jung said, "Suffering does not want to be ignored. It wants to be understood." If you stay until the end, you will begin to see what most people never recognize in their entire lives. That freedom from suffering does not come from eliminating it, but from learning to read the message hidden inside it. And once you understand that language, the loop will finally end. Imagine a mirror hanging in a house you've walked past every day. You know it's there, but you rarely stop to look. Each time you catch a glimpse of your reflection, you quicken your steps as if afraid of confronting something you don't want to see. Suffering is much like that mirror. It doesn't invent new images. It only reflects the parts of yourself you've tried to forget. When you suppress anger, it is recorded in the mirror. When you pretend to be fine, the mirror still keeps the fatigue etched at the corners of your eyes. When you run from your true desires, the mirror shows you a pale, lifeless face. And the longer you refuse to look directly, the more estranged you feel from yourself. Jung believed that suffering is the soul's natural mechanism of reflection. It does not arrive to destroy you. It comes to show you what you've abandoned. Like a mirror, it doesn't add. It doesn't subtract. It simply stays faithful to the truth. The problem is not the mirror, but your avoidance of it. Perhaps you felt lost many times without knowing why. You changed jobs, changed environments, even changed the people around you. Yet the emptiness always returned. That is because you were altering the scenery outside, while the mirror within remained in the same place, waiting for you to pause and face it. Seen from this perspective, suffering is not a sentence. It is an invitation to return, to stop and look at your reflection even if it feels uncomfortable at first. And only when you dare to pause, when you dare to face it, do you realize the image in the mirror is not as frightening as you imagined. In fact, hidden within it are strengths you had long forgotten you ever possessed. If you are honest, you will realize that you have betrayed yourself many times. When someone crossed your boundary, you forced a smile instead of speaking up. When an opportunity appeared, you excused yourself with safety and let it pass. When your heart wanted something different, you stayed silent because you feared others wouldn't agree. These moments look small, but they are the cracks that slowly make you feel estranged from who you are. This is why you can live inside a so-called stable life and still feel heavy. You're not lacking work, nor the presence of others around you, but you are lacking the most essential thing: honesty with yourself. Each time you choose silence over truth, you reinforce a loop, and that loop returns to you as emptiness, fatigue, and a sense of hollowness you cannot explain. Suffering, in this case, is not punishment. It is the bill you pay for repeatedly abandoning your inner voice. The longer you postpone, the higher the cost becomes. That is why you feel more exhausted with time, not lighter, even though on the surface you seem fine. If you keep avoiding, the consequences will go beyond fatigue. They will show up in relationships where you always feel like you give more than you receive. They will show up in your work, where you complete tasks but find no meaning in them. And most dangerously, they will appear in the way you see yourself, as if you are living someone else's life, not your own. Jung once warned, "If you do not confront your own darkness, you will spend your life living in the shadow of others." The real question is not whether you are suffering, but whether you dare to admit that most of that suffering began the moment you turned your back on yourself. You've grown used to calling yourself weak whenever you cry. You've grown used to labeling yourself a failure whenever you feel lost. You've grown used to whispering, "I am not enough," whenever you compare yourself to others. But if you shift your perspective, you will see that none of these truly define who you are. They are only signals, the language your soul uses to speak to you. The problem is not the feelings themselves. It is the words you have unknowingly turned into shackles. Jung believed that suffering does not want you to bow your head in submission. It wants you to rename it. Fatigue is not weakness. It is the sign you are living too far from what truly matters. Tears are not collapse. They are reminders that your heart is still alive, still longing for what is real. Emptiness is not failure. It is the space your being opens so you can place new meaning inside. When you change your language, your experience changes as well. Try replacing "I am weak" with "I am listening to a signal." Replace "I have failed" with "I am learning to understand myself better." Replace "I am useless" with "I am standing at the threshold of transformation." It may sound small, but the words you use each day shape the way you move through life. Language doesn't just describe reality, it creates it. The crucial step is to reframe how you see suffering itself. It is not a pit meant to swallow you. It is a passage leading down into the basement of your mind, where you've hidden the forgotten fragments. If you dare to descend, you'll discover not only shadows, but treasures. Strength, courage, the freedom to say more. The qualities you buried long ago just to keep others pleased. Be careful. If you continue to use the old language, you reinforce the old loop. Each time you call yourself a failure, you are slamming shut the door of change right in front of you. Each time you whisper, "I am not worthy," you hand over power to the shadow to dictate your life. This is the most silent danger, not the suffering outside, but the words you use to imprison yourself within. But here also lies the key. You can choose your language again, and when you choose differently, you begin rewriting the entire script of your life. You don't need to shout, you don't need to prove. Just begin with the way you name things. This is not the enemy. This is a message. This is not failure. This is an invitation. If you are patient enough to reach the end of this journey, you will touch something the majority never see. That suffering is not a full stop, but a comma, opening the way to a new chapter. And the language you choose is the pen that decides how that chapter will be written. Any theory is meaningless if you never try to live it. Jung believed that change begins with the smallest steps, because the unconscious does not open through loud upheavals, but through simple gestures repeated day after day. First step. Take a few minutes to write down the moments that made you uncomfortable during the day. Don't try to explain them. Just record exactly what you felt. The words are not for anyone else to read. They are a way for you to begin hearing signals you've long ignored. Second step. Pay attention to your body. Each time you feel heavy, pause for a moment and ask yourself, where in my body am I holding this emotion? It might be your chest, your shoulders, your stomach. Simply naming it makes suffering less vague. It becomes something observable. Third step. Experiment with changing the way you speak about yourself. When you're about to say, "I am useless," stop and replace it with, "I am learning to find my direction." Each time you change the words, you change the frame. And the frame itself changes the experience. You don't need an instant transformation. You only need to begin unlocking small doors, one by one. Each time you do, it's like turning the dial of a radio, tuning back into your true signal. And from those small shifts, the larger picture of your life will begin to change. If you continue to avoid, suffering will not disappear. It only changes its shape. Today it may appear as lingering fatigue, tomorrow as cracks in a relationship, and later as exhaustion so deep you no longer find meaning in anything. That is the price of ignoring the inner voice. The loop returns again and again, each time sharper, each time harder to escape. Many believe that time will heal, but the truth is, time only drives the wound deeper if you never face it. You can change your environment, change the people beside you, even change your dreams, but the emptiness will still follow, because it was never outside. It has always been in the part of you you never allowed to live. Jung believed the greatest privilege of a human life is to become oneself. It may sound simple, but in reality, it is a quiet revolution. Because the moment you dare to live authentically, you shatter the entire system of suppression that has governed you for years. At that point, suffering no longer weighs you down. It becomes the door leading you back to wholeness. If you choose the path of confrontation, the consequences transform as well. Fatigue turns into guidance. Tears turn into reminders. Emptiness becomes the open space where new meaning can be placed. In that moment, you are no longer dragged by fate. You begin to rewrite it with awareness. The point is not that you will never feel pain again. Life will always bring loss, always bring challenges. The difference is this: you will no longer fear them. You will know how to read the signals, how to listen, and you will know that even in darkness, there is a part of you waiting to be seen. And here lies the final philosophy. Suffering is not the end, but the beginning. It does not come to destroy you. It comes to return you to yourself. The only question left is this: will you keep repeating the loop, or will you step through the door that suffering has been holding open all along? Imagine within you there is an old wooden door. For years, you've walked past it without daring to touch the handle, believing only darkness lay behind it. But if you pause, you will see it has never been fully shut, and fragile rays of light have been slipping through the crack all along. Suffering is that crack of light. It was never meant to imprison you. It has been waiting for you to gather the courage to open it, to finally face what has always been there. In these 23 minutes, you have seen one truth clearly. Suffering was never a sentence. It is a map, a mirror, a bell that patiently calls you back. And each time you dare to face it, you don't just walk through pain, you step closer to the essence of who you are. When this video ends, I invite you to hold 1 minute of silence, not to think, but to listen. Listen for the crack of light shining from within you. It may be small, it may tremble, but it is the reminder that you have never lost the way back. And on the journey ahead, you may discover another door waiting, where the light is wider, deeper, more radiant. But to reach it, you must begin with the door standing before you today.